Hey guys, welcome back to the Friday Vlog here on the BuzWeaver channel. And yes, we did forego the traditional intro as I've been under the weather for the last couple of days. I am now recovering. Thankfully, it is not COVID related, but nonetheless, I want to thank all of you guys for your continued support here of the channel, those on New Tech as well as subscribers here on YouTube. And if you are new to the channel, welcome, although it is a different intro than we typically have. We start things off from the Daily Mail. As Biden repeats claim that nobody could have known Afghan army would collapse, bombshell transcript from July reveals he pressured Afghan President Ghani to create perception Taliban wasn't winning, whether it's true or not. So a classic example of Joe Biden trying to take credit away, trying to steal President Trump's thunder by going with a more appropriate plan that President Trump had already set up, that was already designed. Yes, they had anticipated removing people first, then the equipment, and then leaving it to the Afghans and or even the Taliban, who they knew would eventually come in anyway, but at least they would have had time to at least prepare properly and not have this complete disaster that we saw there in Afghanistan, unfortunately, with even with the bombings and the loss of life of the 13 service people there. So President Joe Biden wanted the now departed Afghan president to create the perception that his government was capable of holding off the Taliban, an indication he knew it was only a matter of time before the U.S. ally fell to the Islamic group, even while reassuring Americans at home that it would not happen. Now, you guys may remember the uproar the Democrats were in over President Trump's phone call to Ukraine. But here we have a president right here from recordings that are from the Daily Mail of all places. I haven't actually seen this on our media here in the States, which doesn't surprise me. But here we can see that he placed a call to Ghani because, of course, he had his own Joe Biden plan there for Afghanistan. And, of course, it led to the loss of many lives and injuries, as well as just a horrific overall event that happened there to begin with. So thank you, America. Taliban now has up to 48 aircraft, including U.S. supplied Blackhawks and A-29 attack planes, after Afghan army collapse left them with more air power than many NATO nations. That's right. So now you have the Taliban, who has an air force better than Slovenia, North Macedonia, Albania, Bosnia, Lithuania, and so forth. So it's quite extraordinary, because Joe Biden, who is the surrogate president for the establishment, and the establishment probably had no concept, no idea of how to handle this to begin with, even if they did consult with the various individuals from the administration. Then, of course, you have all the woke generals that we have in our country as well. So this inch that was given to the left, because they couldn't reconcile emotionally or psychologically that President Trump was the duly elected president, has led our country into this extraordinary hijack of our culture and just complete collapse of every semblance of what our country is about. Now, speaking of collapse of governments, Australia, unprecedented surveillance bill rushed through Parliament in 24 hours. Australian police can now hack your device, collect or delete your data, take over your social media accounts. It's rather extraordinary. But I did watch an interview with Sydney on Timcast IRL. She is Australian born, but she has citizenship in both Australia and the United States. We've talked about Sydney before. But she was mentioning that the people in Australia have really, this isn't anything particularly new to them as far as, as we've discussed before, whether it's the UK, whether it's Europe or even Australia, that people are kind of conditioned to be trusting of their government. In other words, that the government has their interest in mind, and or that because they have the greater good mindset, that the government will have their particular interest in mind. And in reality, they don't. The government has its own initiatives, its own directives, even here in the United States. But at least here in the States, of course, thankfully, we have the Constitution and our Bill of Rights that keep us protected specifically from government. But here in Australia, they can just come right in. The police can just come to your home, collect whatever data and information they want without a warrant. So I wasn't going to go into all the details, but there are like point bulletins here about how they don't even need a warrant to be able to just come to your door and do whatever it is they need to do. And of course, we know from Queensland, where they're setting up all of the various concentration camps for those who don't comply with any of the particular ordinances that they have there in Australia, which are typically made up as they go along, which is another thing kind of that's a little different from the United States and the UK, Europe, and maybe even Australia, is those governments kind of just make up the rules as they go along, where here in the States, of course, it has to go through legislation and so forth. But even here, you can see within 24 hours, they're already passing this rather oppressive, heavy-handed law, as it were. But they probably didn't need it anyway. But this is just one of those things they throw down in the books just to have it there in case they need it. And we're seeing kind of that impact here in the United States as well. One of them even more pronounced here. Virginia Tech kicks out 134 students who failed to comply with its compulsory vaccine mandate or present an exemption. Now, at least here, Virginia Tech is probably at least allowing those exemptions for individuals who can't get the vaccine, and we've talked about that too. You know, individuals, for example, that have the Guillain-Barré syndrome, people that have muscular sclerosis or MS, as well as compromised immune system, some of those being, you know, individuals that are going through cancer treatment. And there was a list of those from the CDC. Of course, it's not more comprehensive from the CDC, and it really should be, in my opinion. They should be very specific with who can and can't get them. But if New York continues on pressing the way it is with de Blasio, he's not making any exemptions whatsoever. So that's going to fall into the American Disabilities Act, or the ADA, where it is a discrimination to prohibit people from being able to utilize a particular facility or a business or an establishment and be be ostracized because they aren't able to get the vaccine. So that's going to present a huge problem for New York. But again, we see a kind of a heavy-handedness here in the United States, which is like I was telling some people in my previous video, if you guys haven't seen it, the one I did on late Wednesday evening, where I talked about the CDC was suggesting that people not travel over Labor Day weekend. It is Labor Day weekend here in the United States. And so it's, you know, the way it was worded by the Hill, that kind of made it out like the CDC was telling people not to do something, but really they have no authority to do that. And really, there's no way that any law enforcement in our country could really start issuing citations to people without masks, or even arrest people for not getting a vaccine. It just is not going to happen. Even if it were to happen, let's say hypothetically someone was fined or even arrested for not having a mask or not having gotten the vaccine, I don't know of any competent, sober, cogent judge in this country, at least in the States when I worked here in the United States, in law firms, as well as with the state. I don't know any judge that would prosecute someone. I would see that these fines and everything would just be thrown out because we're protected under the Constitution. So I don't ever see that really happening here. So that's what I had for you guys this week. I know I don't have the standard introduction and closing, but nonetheless, guys, I want to thank you for the likes, the shares, and the comments. Your participation is always appreciated. And appearing right there on the screen, that would be the channel icon to subscribe, along with notifications. And of course, below the video, the various websites that I belong to. And I will see you guys right there behind the recording camera this week, next Friday.